Okay, I think we will start now if you'd all like to settle. And I will introduce our first speaker for this afternoon session, who is Kari Kunin, who's going to talk to you about marketing yourself.
Hello everyone, I hope you have all had a good lunch and you are all back refreshed, ready to go for the second half. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is marketing yourself as a freelance. So what I'm going to tell you isn't going to be useful if what you're going to be doing next is going off and applying for a job in-house. It's strictly freelance translator and interpreting. Well, it's great to see so many of you here and so many of you taking an interest in our profession. And it's one that I've been in for 25 years. And I still love getting up in the morning and sitting in front of my computer. And I really hope that after you've been in it as long as I have, that you still love it as much. Here's a little bit about me. I translate German, Dutch and Afrikaans into English. I've lived in Austria, I've lived in the Netherlands and in South Africa. I specialize in marketing, websites, anything really to do with communication and writing with impact that will get the audiences responding the way you want them to respond. I also have a specialism in agriculture, horticulture and food, which is kind of like a bit of a hobby of mine, so it's really nice to be able to use my knowledge from my hobby in my work as well. So what I'm going to be talking about, first of all, we'll have a look at what marketing used to be like before the internet, which is when I started out. We'll be looking at what you're going to be selling. We'll look at how you think about your USP, your unique selling proposition or selling point. We'll be looking at who you're going to be marketing to, how to do that, and then I'll be talking a little bit about where you can get help and support and give you some good titles for some essential reading as well. Now, when I started out, everything was done on electric typewriters with a bottle of Tipex. And the way we did our marketing was I had to go down to the local library where there were banks and banks of yellow pages, huge thick volumes, one per county. And I literally photocopied all the entries for translation agencies in all the counties, and I wrote them. I sent off letters in envelopes with stamps to all these agencies, and it worked. I did start to get some work coming in, but we had nothing like the resources that you have today. With the internet and social media, you have so many more options, which we'll look at, which also have their downsides. We'll look at that as well. So, first of all, you need to be absolutely clear what it is you're selling before you even start marketing your services. Are you a translator? Are you an interpreter? Are you going to be doing both? Is there anything else you might include? For instance, you might want to do editing or proofreading as well as a service. Whatever you choose to do, make sure you emphasize them equally. You can sometimes see translators' websites with, at the bottom right-hand corner, you might have, I'm also an interpreter. You need to be clear about your services that you're offering and pay equal attention to all of them. Otherwise, you're not going to get any work in the other ones and you won't be taken seriously. Think about your specialisms. We've heard a lot about specialisms already. You may not have a specialism as yet, but as you gain experience in your work, you will hopefully find that you gravitate towards a particular field that you find that you're good at writing in or that you're interested in, and that will become your specialism. If you have any specialist fields at the moment, you can already include them in your marketing. Be clear about those. And then your unique selling propositions. This is very important because I want you to have a look around you. There are a lot of you here today, 200 or so people. Any one of these could be your competitor. Now, if you multiply that by 100, by 1,000, there are an awful lot of translators out there already. So what you need to do is you need to differentiate yourself in some way. Now, what I mean by a unique selling proposition is not, I deliver quality work. It's not, I always meet deadlines. Because if you're not doing those things, you shouldn't be a professional translator in the first place. Clients will expect you to do that, so that's not setting you apart. You have to think about things like, perhaps you have a particular knowledge of, I don't know, something like HTML, or a particular hobby that you're passionate about. Maybe you're an experienced horse rider, for example. Perhaps you've even got family members who are lawyers or doctors who you can get first-hand information from. All these things will set you apart, and that's what you need to focus on as your USP. Have a think about your USP before you start your marketing. So who do you want to sell your services to? Are you going to go for agencies, translation agencies, or are you going to go for direct clients? We've heard quite a bit about those already today, but what I would add to that is that when you're sending your CV to translation agencies, you need to target, we'll talk about targeting in a minute, but you need to focus your CV to the particular needs of the agency that you're applying to. Agencies are great when you're starting out because they, as we've heard from Joanna, they will do a lot of the marketing for you, and they will be a steady flow of work for you. Direct clients, when you're fresh out of university or when you're starting out right at the beginning of your career, are, as we've heard already also, very hard to find. And I must say that I wouldn't be where I was today if I hadn't started out working for translation agencies. And I still do, even after 25 years, I've got a lot of translation agency clients still. Now, in all of this, you have to remember that you're a business selling a service. You're not someone going out looking for a job. It's a very different approach. And a lot of translators tend to forget that they are business people. So it's a professional attitude that you need to project in your marketing. So I want to go into quite a bit of detail about how you're going to go about doing the marketing. We'll talk about how you can write a compelling CV. We're going to have a look at whether or not you need a website, getting your profile out there in all the right places, a little bit about branding. And then I want to have a word with about two kinds of marketing, what we call outbound marketing, which is direct mail and cold calling, and inbound marketing, which is where you can really sort of start using social media to your advantage. And we have actually already heard quite a lot about networking with your peers and prospects, but I'm going to talk about that as well. It's a very important part of marketing. So the first thing you need is a very compelling CV. Now this is what you can see here. This is mine. It's more of a sort of a business profile than a traditional CV. That's fine. You can just have a fact sheet about yourself or a traditional CV. I've got a photo on it. It's quite nice to have a picture so that people know who they're dealing with. I've also, in that grey box there, I've got a sort of a testimonial from a client. Now, it's very important to keep it to 2 pages. That's not just in translation, that's across the board. Any more than 2 pages of a CV probably won't get read, so keep it brief. Tell the truth. Don't fib about qualifications or courses that you've been on, things like that, because they may well be checked. Memberships, don't fib about memberships. Your prospective client may well check up on those. And as I said, you tailor your CV to your client. So if, for example, you're trying to sell your services to a legal translation agency, for example, then say a little bit about legal experience that you have, if you have any. What you're doing with your CV is you're not saying, hey, here I am, I'm a translator, use me. You're saying, what can I do for you? What are your needs and how can I fill them? And that's why you shouldn't send out the same CV to absolutely everybody. Tailor it to the people you're sending it to. And don't forget to keep it up to date. It's so easy to get your CV done and say, oh, right, that's it, I'll just file it away. And then you forget. You've got to update it as you get more work experience, you may take another course, add it to your CV. And a final tip about CVs is send them out as PDFs. They do look much more professional than a Word document. Then we come on to the question of whether you need a website. Well, obviously, these days, some sort of web presence is going to be really useful. It doesn't have to be a fully fledged website at this stage. That can get quite expensive. But indeed, a lot of translators don't ever have a fully fledged website. A simple web page is certainly enough to start with, and it might be on one of the translators forums that I'll be talking about in a minute. It might be on LinkedIn, for example. That's enough. But just being out there on the internet is going to enable you to get found better. It makes you more accessible through professional directories. When you join a professional association, you will ultimately be listed. And I say ultimately because if you join the ITI, you need to be a qualified member before you can actually get listed in their directory. But you can also, for example, join professional associations to do with your chosen specialism, and then you'll be listed as a member in their directory. And from my own experience, I know that when people are looking for translators to outsource work to, and I'm sorry, I'm including interpreters here. I'm a translator myself, so if I don't say interpreter, I do mean both. When they're looking to outsource work, if you're listed in a directory with a website that they can click on, then they can go straight through to that website and find out much more information about you. And your website or your web page is really the place where you can let your personality shine. You can say much more on there than on your two-page CV. So places to be seen. Well, first of all, as I said, it's very important to join a professional association, both a translating and interpreting one, and possibly also one in your chosen specialist area. Chambers of Commerce are another association that you can join. And translators' portals, we have heard this morning a little bit about prose.com or pros. Nobody really knows quite how to pronounce it. The Americans say prose, I think, actually, so however you pronounce it. Translators Cafe is another one. And the beauty of these is that you can set up your profile completely free. You don't have to pay a membership. And you can tailor it and put all the information on there so that you will be found. And the advantage of prose.com is that it does rank very highly on Google. So when people search for translation language combinations, very often the prose.com entries will come up at the top of the search engine results. Prose.com does have a bit of a bad reputation among some translators for offering very low prices, because some jobs are put up there for bidding, so translators will bid and it basically goes to the lowest bidder. But translation agencies do also use places like Prose to find suppliers, and I have myself also had some work at very acceptable rates. So if you hear, you know, who don't go on Prose because the rates are very low, it's not necessarily going to be the case. Now, your chosen social media platforms, I say chosen because social media can be so overwhelming. You've got to do Twitter, you've got to do LinkedIn, you've got to do all of them. You choose the one that you want to go on. I'm going to go into the various platforms now in a bit more details. But that also gets your name out there, and all of this is designed to get your name out there and recognized by peers and prospective customers. Quick word about branding. It's a very fashionable word at the moment, branding, and it's not just about a logo and a clever tagline. Your brand is you. It's everything about the way you do business. It's your professionalism. And a logo is very nice because it enables you to, excuse me, create consistency across all the platforms that you use, across your stationery, your letterhead, your business cards. And by the way, on the subject of business cards, can I just put out a plea? Don't use these really cheap ones that you get in machines like Vistaprint or something. It doesn't look good. Good quality business cards are essential, and they're not expensive these days. So what you're doing with your brand is you're building an image. Now, telling prospective clients about yourself. I mentioned earlier we've got something called outbound marketing and something called inbound marketing. And I want to have a look at both these methods of marketing because they're both equally valid. So outbound marketing is the traditional way of marketing. That's what we used to do before the internet. But it's still used today. It's sending out letters, sending out emails to people, and it's saying, I'm here, here's my information, I'm sending it to you guys. So if I were to email all of you with my details, that's outbound marketing. It's what you do when you send your CVs to translation agencies. Now, if you do this, you all know from your own experience with email that there's an awful lot of spam out there. So you have to be very careful when you email anyone, translation agencies, that it's recognizable that it isn't spam. So what you need to do is you need to pick up the phone to the translation agencies, find out who it is you need to talk to, or you need to send your email to, your CV, and target it at that person. And write something good in the subject line. Don't just put CV or German to English translator. Put your name, personalize it a bit. Excuse me. And always follow up. I can't emphasize that enough. It's no good just sending out all your CVs to all and sundry. Follow it up a week later. Did you get my CV? Have you had a chance to look at it? Shall I send it again? Because they might say, oh no, I didn't get that. So do your follow-ups, very important. Cold calling is, when you just phone random companies to try and drum up business, not for everybody. I wouldn't like to do that at all. But if it is something that you fancy doing, again, do your homework, prepare very well so that you can actually get through to the people you want to speak to. The other form of marketing, using social media, is called inbound marketing. And the whole point of all of social media when you use it for marketing is to drive traffic through to your website, which is your shop. So LinkedIn, you can look at it like this. LinkedIn is your CV. Twitter is your information feed. Your blog or Facebook page is your story. And your website is your shop. And everything is driving traffic, driving people, customers, hopefully, into your shop. I want to have a look at the individual platforms that translators find quite useful. So LinkedIn, as I said, it's like your online CV. It can be your only web page, that's fine. A lot of translators just have a LinkedIn profile. And nowadays you can also use it to post articles like a blog. And it's a very useful tool for identifying prospective customers through the LinkedIn groups. Join groups in your specialist field, and then you can pick out clients that you might like to engage with. You can follow their discussions. You can also ask questions. I'm a translator. How do I find out information about this specialist field? And that gets your name recognized gradually, and it will then start registering, hopefully, in prospective clients' minds. It's also a useful CPD tool. Social media. Twitter is best for networking. It's your online water cooler, so it's the place where translators can just chat to other translators in their coffee break or before work, that sort of thing. Really, 3 minutes left, goodness, okay. So again, what you're doing is you're engaging with prospective clients on Twitter. You can identify clients, follow them, and engage with their conversations. Facebook, very briefly, it's better for B2C, which is business to consumer, than it is for B2B, business to business. But, again, a lot of freelancers are on Facebook. Keep your private and your professional pages separate. I've mentioned Standing Out by Andrew Morris. That's a relatively new Facebook page and a community for translators where he talks a lot about how he started out, his client relationships, and there's a lot of discussion, very useful Facebook page to check out. Networking with, yes, as we've said, networking with your peers is extremely important. Go to events, groups through your professional association. ITI has various language, subject and regional groups. And in London, if you're in the London area, we have this very active London regional group as well. Attend conferences, workshops, and the whole point of this, networking with your peers, is that you're making yourself known so that, as we heard in the panel discussion, if other translators or interpreters have assignments that they can't do or they're not in their area, then they'll remember you and they'll hopefully pass on work to you. So referral is a good place for getting work. Get involved with the associations as well. That's also a good way of getting your name out there. Network with potential clients. You can obviously trade shows, trade fairs are a great place to network. B, find out where your prospective clients hang out and hang out there. Trade shows, meetings, that sort of thing. And when you do go to a trade show, what you're not doing is going in there and saying, hi, I'm a translator, here's my card. It's true of any networking event. Here's my card, and thrusting it into people's hands, because that just won't work. What you need to do at a trade show is you'll go up there and you'll say, I'm a translator, I'm researching this topic, this is one of my specialisms, or I'm assembling a terminology database, have you got any information? So you start the conversation that way. Because if you go to a trade show and say, have you got any translation work for me? They don't want to buy from you, they're trying to sell, they don't want to buy. So you have to start the conversation in a different way. Now, you can use every party or wedding or gathering as a networking opportunity. And again, you're not going to go into your party and loaded with cards and saying, here everyone, here's my card, I'm a translator, call me if you need me. You're just listening, you're talking, you're making connections with people. And you never know when somebody you met might meet somebody who needs a translator and they'll remember you. So help and support from your professional associations, and I have to mention here very briefly, put a word in for the ITI online course, which starts in September. It's at the back of your book here. It's called Starting Up as a Freelance Translator. And this one, as yet, is only for translators, I'm afraid. There is not an interpreting one yet. That's an online course with various modules that will help you through the whole process, all given by experienced practitioners. Now, when you join a professional association, think about joining maybe one in your source language and your target language. So you've got two different directories to be in, two different angles. And also, as I said, professional associations in your subject area. Training organisations like ECPD webinars, Alexandria Project, pros.com, all have lots and lots of information on marketing for translators. And the online community is a fantastic place to go and get support. How do I do this? Ask colleagues how they did it, run ideas, bounce ideas off people, and so on. And then finally, a few books that are really worthwhile getting. 1, 2, 3, 4 books, and Andrew Morris's Standing Out Facebook book blog, which I really recommend that you check out. And in all of this marketing, and whether it's social media, whether it's the way you network with your clients, only do what you're comfortable with, but do that well. So with social media, you don't have to immediately have accounts on 4 different media, and then, like, you might think, oh my God, I've got to do some translation work. I can't be on Facebook all day, which is very tempting. So just choose something that you're happy with. Maybe start off small, and then build it up as you go. And whatever you do, do it well, and do it because you enjoy doing it. And then hopefully that will then yield results. It's a slow process, marketing. It is, sorry Jane, you're about to stand there. It is a slow process, but eventually it will pay off. Just keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kari. Kari will be here at the end to take questions on our panel as well. Right, now moving on to Paul Kay, who's going to talk to you about working for the European Union.
Hello everyone. My name's Paul Kay. I work for the European Commission's Translation Service. Not currently as a translator. I currently work as a language officer doing various kinds of outreach work, language-related outreach work based at the Commission's London office. But before that I worked as a translator for the European Commission. What I want to talk to you today is about opportunities to work as linguists, translators, interpreters in the European Union institutions or for the European Union institutions. There's various ways to do that. First, a little bit about me. My best subject at school was French, but I ended up studying biology at university. Very luckily got on a year abroad studying biology in France on Erasmus. I brought my French up. After university, I went to Slovakia in Eastern Europe to teach English. I started learning the language, really got into learning the language and ended up staying on doing different jobs, first as a journalist. Then once I'd learnt the language well enough, I started doing some translation, interpreting, both on staff of Deloitte & Touche, big company, and also freelance. Came back to the UK after a few years and set myself up as a freelance translator, interpreter of Czech and Slovak. Really, actually, not as a long-term thing. I didn't see that as my career at that point. I was really just funding my master's in environment policy. Actually, at that point, I joined the ITI as well. I should give a plug. I was an associate member of the ITI for a while. That helped me a lot at that point. But I only did that for about a year and a half. I did my master's, and that led to a job working as an environment policy journalist, which I did for 10 years, during which I didn't really use my languages at all. But it was that job that took me very early on from working in London to working in Brussels. So I worked in Brussels as a journalist for, must have been 9.5 years. And I really realized I wasn't using my languages enough, and I thought I want to change that. So I saw an advert for a recruitment competition to work for the European Union as a translator. You need 2 other EU languages in addition to your own language. And I thought, well, I have French, I have Slovak, I'll give it a go. To my surprise, I got through. And so for the last 6 years, I've been working for the European Union, the European Commission. Before I came here to London a year ago, I was 5 years in the English language translation department of the European Commission, so translating documents into English from French, Slovak, and also eventually other languages. So that shows you a couple of things that are often misconceptions about working in the EU system. Number one, you don't need a language degree to work as a translator, at least, in the EU. I don't have one. And you don't need a translation qualification either to work as a translator. It's different for interpreters. Both of those will help you, of course, if your aim is to work in the EU system as a translator. But they're not requirements. Okay, so you probably know that the EU has 24 official languages. Started off in 1958 with 4, Italian, German, French, and Dutch. Quite easy to arrange translation and interpreting services when there were only 4 languages. Today we have 24, which creates an awful lot of combinations and means an awful lot of work for linguists. And we have 3 basic types of linguists in the institutions. So we have translators, we have interpreters, you're familiar with those, and we also have people called lawyer linguists. They are essentially translators who have a law qualification, the equivalent of a law degree, either a law degree or a conversion course. They get paid more, and they start off on a higher salary. So if you have a legal qualification on languages, that's something you could consider. You don't mix the jobs. We don't have translators that do interpreting, not if you're on staff at least, anyway. So there are the 3 different roles. I'm a translator. I'm going to talk mainly about translation, and that's mainly because we have more jobs for translators than we do for interpreters in the EU institutions. So we have about 4,300 translators across various EU institutions. I work for the European Commission. You'll have heard of that. You'll have heard of the European Parliament, perhaps the Court of Justice. There are other smaller EU institutions. They all have their own separate translation services, at least, which don't mix very much. And you'd be recruited to one of those. Luckily, we have a single recruitment procedure which applies for all of them. About 1,000 interpreters working in the EU system, about 650 on staff, and then actually I think more than the 350 working as freelance. So translators. This shows where the volume of our translators work. So the blue column is the European Commission. Where I work, that has by far the most number of translators, then the European Parliament, then the Council of Ministers, Court of Justice. We translate from and into all of the EU's 24 official languages. And we cover all the subject areas that the EU is involved with. I mean, for better or worse, whether we agree with it or not, and we'll have a chance to decide by the end of 2017, the EU is involved in a lot of areas of life, from energy policy, environment policy, consumer policy, development policy, energy, all these things. That means that we've got documents and meetings to translate and interpret in all those policy areas, in those 24 languages. So it's quite a range of languages and subject matter, which makes it interesting, an interesting place to work. So I mentioned that I worked for the European Commission's Translation Service, which is known in Brussels code as DG Translation, or DGT. We have about 2,500 translators and support staff. Half are in Brussels, half are in Luxembourg, and we have a small number of what we call field officers in the member states. So I'm one of two in London that's a field officer. I renamed myself a language officer as soon as I got here. Field officer sounds a bit too sinister and a bit too like a spy master or something. If you've got a better word than organigram for one of these, please tell me, because I hate that word. This is just to show you that we arrange our translation services by language department. That might seem obvious, but in the past we were arranged by subject area. All the translators into all the languages, or in between all the languages, doing agriculture would all be together. All those doing environment would be together, all the languages, all the nationalities. With 24 languages, we can't do that anymore. So we're arranged by language, and so I worked in the English language department, translating exclusively into English. The Spanish department translates exclusively into Spanish. The Estonian department, etc., etc. So when you apply for a staff job, the way we organize our recruitment exercises is by language. I'm going to talk more about that later on. So I worked for the English language department. Across the whole of DG Translation, last year we translated to nearly 2.5 million pages. This is the distribution of the number of pages translated by by target language, sorry. So into these languages, I don't know how many of the codes you recognize at the bottom, but English is by far our heaviest workload, so we translate more into English than any other language. That means the English language department has the heaviest workload of all the departments. It doesn't have the highest number of staff members, unfortunately. We have about the same as the French and German departments, which have a lot less work than us. Does that mean we are superhuman and get more money? No. It means that we send out, we outsource more of our translation than the other departments do. In fact, over half of our work in the English language department is done by freelance translators. A little bit more about that later. Okay, so the English language department that I work for translated nearly 250,000 pages last year, 116 translators, 2 field officers. We have some dedicated terminologists doing terminology support work. And then we have management and support staff. We have 3 units, so those translators are organized in 3 units, 2 of which are based in Brussels, 1 in Luxembourg. I happen to have been based in one of the 2 that was in Brussels. And at that level, that unit level, we do have a bit of specialization. So I was in the unit that dealt with environment, energy, transport, and other issues. And our main task in the English department is translating documents that come in, correspondence from EU member states to the European Commission. And that's subtly different from the other language departments. Let's say the Italian language department is mainly translating legislation, EU legislation, from French or English into Italian to be published in the EU's official journal. It means that translators in the Italian department and most of the other departments are generally translating from English all the time. In the English department, we're having to translate from all the different languages, apart from Maltese and Gaelic. Those 2 languages are done both ways by those departments. For obvious reasons in the case of Irish. and in the case of Maltese, because of the UK's previous colonial involvement there, there's a very high level of English. There we are. Every 2 years, I said some of us are in Brussels, some of us are in Luxembourg. Every 2 years we get together in the middle, which happens to be in the lovely Ardennes Hills. And we talk about work and so on, only every 2 years. The most recent one was just a few days ago. So just a Tuesday this week, I was in the Ardennes, and that's us, the English department. Now, there's quite a lot of grey hair there, you'll see, including, unfortunately, a little bit on mine. It's starting to show up on the photographs. We have a lot of people that joined us not long after the UK joined and Ireland, indeed, joined the European Union. A lot of staff who've been there a long time, but are now retiring. So we're actually on quite a steep retirement wave. What that means is we're recruiting young people like you, and not so young, anybody that wants to come and work for us, to replace those people. So we do recruit, we do need people to come and work for us. So that's why I'm here, to try and persuade you to consider it. The English language department, which languages do we translate from? I said we cover them all. These are the volumes that we do. So again, the code's at the bottom. We translate more German into English than any other language. Then French, then Spanish, then the fourth one. Some of you might recognize that language code, EL, Greek. Almost as much Greek as we do French. Why is that? Well, there is the obvious reason, yeah. Economic crises creates a lot of paperwork. And they send us their documents in Greek, which we have to translate into, well, either English, French, or German, but our officials prefer it if we do it into English. But also there are 2 member states using Greek, Greece and Cyprus. So we've got 2 streams of documents from 2 member states coming in. That's why the volume's so high in Greek. A couple of years ago, Greek was the second language, and at one point during that year, it was the most common language we were translating. We don't have that many people inside the department that can translate from Greek to English. We have a good number. But we have vastly more that can do French, German, Spanish, Italian. We also have quite a lot of volume in other languages, Polish, Bulgarian, Hungarian, languages that don't tend to get taught at universities here very much. And so we have what we call a deficit internally in capacity in those languages, people with native level English that are able to translate from those languages. What it means is we have to do a lot of training. So we ask translators when they join, would you like to learn a new language? If so, is it going to be Bulgarian or Romanian or Czech or Estonian? So if you like that kind of environment, and it's certainly one of the things that attracted me to the job, it's a great place to work. I've done courses in Hungarian and Estonian and Polish since joining, and really do use those languages. And you're given a lot of support and training to start translating from those languages. Okay. So what kind of job opportunities do we have? We have permanent staff members who are based in either Brussels or Luxembourg, as you've seen. We have temporary contract staff who are also based in Brussels or Luxembourg, but on temporary contracts. We have freelance. I keep doing that. We have freelancers. As I said, especially in the English department, a lot of our work is done by freelancers. I'm not going to talk about that, but very much, but I can answer questions on the panel later, or if you want to come and talk to me in the break or at the end, I can talk about that. We also have trainee positions for graduates, traineeships, which I'll talk about later, which could be useful for getting a taste of working in the EU system, whether it's for you or not. So staff translators, what are the recruitment criteria? You have to be an EU citizen. You need an EU passport. If you want to work for the English department, it doesn't have to be a British or Irish passport. It can be any passport, Estonian, whatever. You need a university degree in languages or another field, as I mentioned earlier. It doesn't have to be a language degree. And you don't require professional experience. I mean, I had a lot of professional experience before I came in. We do have people that come in almost from university with not much. So you don't need to have done an apprenticeship anywhere. What kind of language knowledge do you need? You need a perfect command of your main language or your mother tongue. So you need native level ability in that language. And then you need what we call a very sound knowledge of English, French, or German as your first source language. So in my case, English is my main language. So I had to have French or German as my first source language, where it was French. And then you have to have a very sound knowledge of a second source language out of one of the other 22, at that point, EU official languages. So it can be German if you chose French. So if you're translating into English, it can be French and German into English. Or it can be French and Estonian into English. What can we offer you in return for considering coming to spend your life in Brussels or Luxembourg? Both really nice places, by the way. Starting salary is about €4,500 a month. Very good leave entitlement. Job security, once you've gone through a 9-month probation period, a 9-month probation period, which very few people fail. It's essentially a job for life. I think it should be a bit easier to get rid of people, but it isn't. The work is very varied and challenging, even just within the translation department. I've found that, especially in the English department, because of the range of languages and the extra training that you get to do, and the variety of documents that you work on. It's really a very interesting place to be a translator. You can also shape your own career within the Commission. We have a policy of job mobility, so if you want to move to a different department, say you've got other skills that you've had from a previous career, communication, say, or speech writing, there are other positions elsewhere in this big bureaucracy that you can apply for. So you don't have to stay in that one role for all your career. I mentioned the language learning opportunities. I've benefited from those. It's a multicultural environment. Obviously, there are people from all around the world in both Brussels and Luxembourg, and we have flexible working time arrangements. It's a very good place to work if you have a family. We have flexi time. That's flexi time as in working from home in Brussels or home in Luxembourg rather than home in London. I've mentioned that actually. I don't need to go through that. Now, I mentioned, so that was for the permanent staff position. I mentioned earlier the second role is contract staff. I don't usually go into detail on this. Very occasionally we recruit temporary staff to work in Brussels or Luxembourg, and it is only very occasionally, but as it happens, imminently, hopefully next week, we are going to announce a call for recruiting temporary staff to work in the English department of the Commission. So into English from 2 EU languages, but at least one of which has to be one of these that you see there. That's basically all the 24 languages except English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Maltese and Irish. So if you can translate into English from one of those languages, please go to this link at the bottom of the page or follow my Twitter feed, which I'll give you at the end. And very soon, we'd like you to apply for one of these positions. I'm not going to mention freelance, really, other than to say you can go to that website and check out the information, but we recruit through a process of framework contracts periodically, every few years, and we've just finished one call for tenders for these framework contracts. Given that you're at an event where you're starting work as a translator or interpreter, you probably won't have the experience to be able to apply for one of these, to put forward one of these tenders. So, but there's more information there at the bottom if you want, and I can talk to you at the end. We have traineeships, internships. They last 5 months. There's 2 rounds a year. Only for graduates, and they're mainly for EU citizens, but we do have a quota for other nationals. You need to be able to translate from 2 languages into your main language, as staff translators do. There's a monthly grant of, I think it's about €1,100, which is pretty good for a traineeship, for an internship. Go to the link at the bottom there, there's much more information about it. So that's DG Translation, the European Commission's translation service. We're all over social media, Carrie, apart from LinkedIn, I think. But follow us on those places. I said I wasn't going to talk very much about interpreting, mainly because we have fewer jobs for interpreters. But if you do want more information, you can go to those links there. Okay, very briefly, on the selection process for getting a permanent staff position for both either translator or interpreter. Go to this website. There's a massive amount of information there. I would urge you all to go there and register. And once we announce, we organise, we recruit through open, competitive civil service recruitment examination procedure. And when we say we're launching a new examination procedure, it gets publicised at that website. And I said it's per language, so translators into English, interpreters into French. And they will come up periodically there. The basic procedure is that there's firstly a round of computer-based tests that happen in your country. And then there's something called an assessment centre, which happens in Brussels. But you get expenses paid to go and do that. And then if you're successful through both those steps, you get put on a reserve list, which means you've passed the examination, you're eligible to be recruited. It doesn't guarantee a job, but it means you've got a very good chance of getting a job with the institutions once you're on that reserve list. That's the website. I say go there. There's lots of other information, but sign up, and that's where we announce our recruitment competitions. The computer-based tests comprise verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, abstract reasoning, and situational judgement. We haven't got time to go through them, but they're this kind of thing. You'd have seen them in other contexts, other employers, I'm sure. Read the text, give the answer. The really bright among you will have seen that that's D. Numerical reasoning, this kind of thing. You've already got a 1 in 4 chance. I mean, no linguist likes this kind of thing, but you can practice them, you can get better at them. Well done if you got A. Abstract reasoning, again, I'm not keen on these, but again, practice them, you get better at them. It's D. And then situational judgment, you're given a situation, you have to say which is the most and least effective response in that situation. Unfortunately, unless you pass these tests and get in the top 100, however many we're looking to recruit, the top 100, we can't see how good a translator or interpreter you are. So you have to get good at these, practice these, and pass that stage, because it's at the next stage, the assessment centre, usually in Brussels, where we test your language skills. Now, the assessment centre is testing various skills, I don't like competencies, but skills, analysis, problem solving, prioritising, resilience, that kind of thing. It takes a day and a half. You have to do that in your second language. So your first source language. So in my case, it would have been French. So French or German if you're an English speaker. The first half day is practical language tests. A bit more about that in a second. And then the second day, the whole day, is taken up by doing an oral presentation in your second language, a structured interview with an interview panel, and a group exercise with other candidates who are also speaking in their second language. The practical language test, that's the half day. For translation, it's 2 translation tests, about 45 lines on a PC. You're allowed to bring in paper dictionaries, which might surprise you, from your 2 source languages into your main language. For interpreting, for each of your 2 languages, you have to do a consecutive speech of 5 to 6 minutes with a live speaker, no breaks, and then a simultaneous speech, 10 to 12 minutes from a video recording. If you're successful through that stage, you get put on what I call the reserve list. That means you're eligible for a job. Our managers, when they're recruiting, can only recruit from that list of people that have passed the exams. How long is a piece of string as to how long it takes for you to be recruited? They've put here on this slide 12 months. A friend of mine who passed the most recent recruitment competition was starting work within 4 months. So, when to apply? The linguist competitions for translators, interpreters are always in summer. So next month there will be some coming up. We don't have any this summer for translators into English. We expect that to be next summer. But other languages, translation into other languages, competitions will be coming up next month for those. So keep an eye on that website. So thanks very much. Sorry for going over time. 24 official languages. I never know how to get rid of that picture. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter. And I will be putting information about new recruitment competitions at that Twitter feed. I only tweet about language there.
Right. Thank you very much, Paul. Right, our next speaker is Martin Esposito, who's going to explain what his enigmatic talk title is all about.
Martin.
Ascolta, piove dalle nuvole sparse, piove sulle tamerici salmastre ed arse, piove sui pini scagliosi ed irti, piove sui mirti divini. Those of you who appreciate the rhythm and beauty of these lines, but cannot entirely grasp its full meaning, might think of engaging a bilingual English-Italian conference interpreter, a liaison interpreter, an escort interpreter, consecutive, simultaneous, whatever interpreter. Whether it's a business meeting or choosing the marble floors for your villa in Tuscany, voiceovers, proofreading, a discreet professional presence guiding you beyond simple gist and providing a competent level playing field with your interlocutors. My name is Martin Esposito, which is in itself a bridge between these two languages and, more importantly, the cultures. And thank you for welcoming me here. I thought I'd speak a foreign language to start with. It seems appropriate. I'm very glad the people who have preceded me have talked about how to become a translator, interpreter, and what to do when you start out and when you are one of them. What I would like to talk about in my enigmatic title is what it feels like, what happens to you, where you live, what are the questions and the problems you have to solve. I do not live in academic circles very much. I'm very much a full-time conference interpreter. I travel between Rome and London. I live in both places. Occasionally, Milan comes within my radar. But work I secure in London usually takes place all over Europe. Occasionally, I go outside Europe. On average, I'm away from home 8 to 10 nights in a month. Not altogether, but it can be at times. So what can I do for you, the lady who spoke earlier, just after lunch, said, when you send your CV? What do you need? I would have liked to have an Italian volunteer here and simply translate that person. Time doesn't allow. But if this had happened, what we try to underline is not the fact that this poor person still hasn't learnt any English and is no good, and therefore needs the help of some kind of walking stick in the form of a professional who can muddle him through a business meeting. It's a bit different. It's a bit like having a personal trainer or personal shopper. This is being a personal linguist, a personal communicator. Those who have a personal trainer don't have one because they're fat and useless. It's because their body deserves the attention of a professional. And personal shopping doesn't mean that you have no taste. It simply means that only a professional can follow you in your choices. And the same must apply to a linguist. This is partly marketing, but partly what the mission is about. It's that of conferring eloquence to someone who has given their life to something else, to something more technical, to something very specific, and who might not have the gift of languages in those instances. I'm getting into this habit as well. or other kinds of work entail the fact that the specific professional high-flying stuff is very easy for them. Most people know what they're talking about in English if they are Italian when it comes to their job. And then they go to pieces later at the cocktail reception or at the dinner party. And that's when you come in. How do we do it? Linguistically, I think my colleague who spoke before me was perfectly accurate in describing the process of study and then application in one of the many possibilities. I occasionally work for the EU institutions, but as a replacement of people I know. I'm not formally involved with them. We cultivate a sense of belonging, ease, swiftness, sobriety of life as we travel, and we work in other people's minds, in other people's brains, in other people's offices, and in other people's countries. And context, which I'm sure you know is everything, can be deceptive. Where is this? Istanbul, thank you. Any other guesses? Thank you. It's Milan. Where is this? We're going to feel a little more uncomfortable now about guessing. Very good. It's Monte Carlo, Monaco. So that is some of the problems we find ourselves in. Stereotypes have no place in our job. Those who sit closer may find more difficulty focusing on something which is too close up to them. But those at the back may see it more easily. What can you read at the back? Thank you. But shift your focus a little bit. Things change. We live in non-places. We have to make a home of it. A lot of this home takes place in your lifestyle, in the way you conduct yourself. You need to leave all hindrances behind you. These may be a tummy ache, the fact that you don't sleep very well in new hotel beds, the fact that you haven't got your favorite mug for your favorite tea brew. And you have to do without all this. It's very much a life in the field. There are instances in which you have to sacrifice your own persona and your own sense of style a little bit. These are the funky and less comfortable ones. There are places which look nice but may definitely make you feel a little bit out of place. But the goal is always the same. The goal is that of removing incidentals, removing everything you don't need, so that you and your language are able to communicate or to make others communicate. You don't come into it. You're a shadow in that way. This is the way we would like to feel, but we feel and look very different. There are softer tools, crucial tools. I've mentioned them earlier. Lifestyle and what I like to call mental ecology, which is the only term I can come up with which isn't affiliated to some form of fashion or religion or belief, such as mindfulness, rather carries a connotation of Eastern meditation. Mental ecology, I think, sums it up. I've made it up. I don't know how long it'll last, but use it if you like. Ooh, this is why. Thank you. The same kind of ecology happens in technology. You need to be fast, you need to be swift, you need to be portable. I've just come, and I apologize if I missed the morning, from a talk on technology. Technology makes us human. Technology used badly makes us machines. It's much easier to talk to your house than to type on a computer. Typing is more machine-like, more monkey-like. Talking to your phone is more natural. It's not the same as having a conversation with a human being. Nobody's saying that. But fiddling, messing with cables, with batteries, with things that you haven't prepared, stepping up on stage and being ready with your languages, with everything else. You've had your water, you're perfectly hydrated, and then you don't have the right adapter for your jack plug. That's a problem. This is one example of very simple portable technology. It's an NFC chip. NFC is something which is normally contained in here. And you can attach it to various media, for example, a business card. Anybody with an Android phone, come and touch this later. I will take possession of your phone and my business card will be transferred there. More simply, you can use something to evoke a dictionary. If you need a dictionary in 0.2 seconds, while you're busy with your cables, with your pen, with everything else, and you can't make it work. Sometimes you can't hear well. Does that make you a bad interpreter, a good interpreter? You're just the same. Remove the hindrances. Choosing a headphone is a very neglected skill. This is a simple example of how a new form of technology works. It's a bone conduction device which goes straight into your inner ear without disturbing your ears. It rests on your skull and through the vibration of the bones you can hear. It doesn't deafen you. In the long run, you may have benefits, you may have a job for life. Go and look at the statistics for deafness, for stress, for other things that happen to interpreters. It's worthwhile considering that technology can humanize us a little bit. I won't trouble you with other devices, Bluetooth modules, smart pens, which record and synchronize what you say with what you've heard and with what you've got to translate, make your life easier. But I will dwell a little bit on the human network. This is the beginning of a human network, and at the end, of course, you'll have all my data, because this is a message in a bottle for you, a way to connect, as I'm beginning to hit that age where I need the younger generation to follow my ideas and to give me work, as the older generation is on its way to a safe environment of retirement. Lots of us take from the internet, and there are so many resources, as the first speaker after lunch mentioned. Sorry, I was too late to catch your name. But at the panel, I'll find out, no doubt. We take from the internet. We never hesitate to go to Google. And then when we find our own papers, our own things, a tweet about something I've said, we get upset. We want our privacy or our privacy. We want it to be a closed world. How dare you put a picture of me up? Only 20 years ago, when we used to go to the Arab countries, I grew up in Damascus, Syria. People used to get scared when you tried to take a picture of them, and we thought, how uncivilized. Now, this is what we've become. We take a lot. And then we're surprised that Google is sourcing, cutting, pasting, making automatic what had been the hard work of finding maybe a word and so on. These networks work very well, LinkedIn, Facebook, and everything else. I'm going to do something about this. If you give back. So the question is, what do you give back? What ideas do you have? You may think, I'm a simple young student, what have I got to contribute? Some people just need enthusiasm. Some people just need to be followed. Lots of older people, meaning myself, of course, have a lot to give and nobody to listen, nobody who will listen to them. That's worthwhile thinking. Every term you take, how much do you give back? I give lots of lectures like this in Italy. I've been to Taiwan. I run a regular feature 3 days in London here. And there's always a lot of taking. There's a lot of, I found this, I heard this, I copied and pasted this, I downloaded that. And there's always stuff missing. We need to give back. This is one way of giving back. I assure you it's not for the money. Another way of giving back is a blog which is called Your Words in Mine. Not very enigmatic. It just means I am the words of the other people. I dwell in their head. I dwell in their thoughts respectfully, so in a sober manner, and trying to help their thoughts get across, no matter what I think about them. And often, well, here's my social feed. This will be on my website, of course, and, of course, my Twitter feed. But there's much more. There's personal networking. Tonight is a meeting with a young student who may think she has nothing to give, but we're going to meet up for coffee, see what happens, see what we can give one another. The questions I find myself asking and answering. These are things that make us deeply human. Some of them are obvious. I don't like reading my slides, but I'll focus on two words which may be less known. Cockpit translation. A very inexpensive and efficient way to translate. It's what you get on television when you hear the actor speaking a foreign language for 1 or 2 seconds, which is then turned down, and you hear the interpreter, a voice without a body. Why is it efficient? We are having problems with money. I hear from the Commission at the EU that a very small percentage, I'm not sure if it's 5 or 8%, actually could do without the languages. So, and most of those who listen to languages say they do it to improve their language. It's not first-hand, this is second-hand information I've had, but I think from a reputable source. We are expensive. They have booths in the EU which are made of bricks and mortar. Normally we sit in some allergy-prone, smaller booth, which is not nice to look at. It sits at the back of a room. It keeps us isolated, insulated. So there's new developments, remote interpreting. If you become an interpreter, you may well work remotely. I remember 25 years ago when I was translating, it was perfectly normal to go into someone's office and use their typewriters and their fax machine. Then translating became remote, and people thought, well, God, I've never even met this client. He's been paying me money for 10 years. And interpreting may go that way. Muscle memory is another concept. It means drilling. It means doing things again and again and again. Sometimes we think language is about understanding concepts. It is initially, when you study grammar or pronunciation, but then it's just about doing it again and again and again. And the same applies to technology. You sit in your booth. What makes you a better interpreter than your younger counterpart? Simply experience, and experience is doing things again. This is neglected in some academic institutions, not necessarily, not in this one in any way, I've heard. But very often we talk and we explain to people rather than doing. And I advocate more of this. A digital identity, my old analog identity. I'd like to keep in touch. If you scan this, it'll send you directly to my website. And I don't have an any questions slide because I know the panel will take care of that. And I think I've managed to make up for those minutes which we had initially lost. Thank you.
No, we don't have any student helpers. I was going to say because we're slightly early, but that might be a good idea because the queuing for refreshments took quite a long time this morning. So I think if we do break now for refreshments and then you come back, but do be patient if they haven't got everything ready yet. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. No, I the students behind us, so I thought that's good. So we'll have Oh.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. The QA.
Oh, no, I mean the stuff that they put on the screen.
Oh, yeah, the recording. No, it's going to be on the website.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, you can catch it there. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, but not around here. Hi. You're great. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I have your presentation, I think. Yeah. But yeah. You're welcome. I leave it right. Excellent.
There are two makes. The American make is called headphones, but the problem with headphones is that some models aren't Bluetooth. Now Bluetooth gives you latency, which means a delay, and it doesn't matter if the music is coming from the house, you don't hear the music out of the phone anyway. But if you have a delay between what's coming in your ear from the air and what's coming through the headphones, you go nuts pretty much. So headphones is that. So do not get the Bluetooth version. The ones I'm using is called Aftershocks. It's simply cheaper. That's a different brand. Different brand from headphones, but they're the same. Just look for very productive. It's not a great music mix. You're missing all
your thing's already up, so it's all set to go. Taylor, this is Craig.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Good. So that's let me take this away.
Yeah, we are ready.
Shall we grab a glass from over there for? Okay. Well, Jane will introduce you anyway.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're just about to start on our last lap. Before I forget, you were handed a questionnaire when you registered. It would be, yes, so there they all go. It would be very helpful if you would fill those in and leave them either on the table on your way out, or there is a box on the tables in the main hall, or failing that, if you see one of our student helpers in green, you could always give it to one of them. So it would be very helpful if you could complete those. Thank you very much. Right, well, our last speaker is going to give you an insight on what it's like to work for a translation company. So here's Craig Brown. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. As Jane said, my name is Craig Brown. I'm a project manager at Doraworth Languages, based in Hammersmith. We're a specialist translation provider for the life science industry, so for pharmaceuticals, medical, that kind of thing. I'm sure it's been a very long day, so I'll try and keep it brief and interesting. I'll talk a little bit about the industry as we see it from the agency's perspective, why you would want to work for us in whatever capacity, who we are and what we do, what we look for in linguists and suppliers, how you can apply to work with us, and then some general tips for a sort of smooth working relationship with us. I was just saying there's an excellent talk from last year from a member of VSI, the subtitling company, who will probably repeat. There'll be a few repeats as to what she said. It's all fairly general stuff. When you work for an agency, you work with many different types of linguists, and there are some crossovers everywhere. So let me just make a start with a changing industry. So this sort of doom and gloom, first of all. Machine translation and similar terms are thrown around. In an industry where we produce words, frequently larger agencies will try to automate the less efficient side of the translation process. Some of the larger ones do this by acquiring small specialist firms, adding to their departments, adding to their competencies. And the result of this is that you're less likely to work directly with end clients these days, and it's getting more and more the case that you'll have no choice but to work for agencies as they grow larger. I think at the moment, the outsourcing translation industry is worth about £26 billion, and the top 3 companies represent about 3% of that. But it's increasing at such a rate, and as they acquire these smaller, more specialist agencies, that's set to become 10 to 15% within the next 10 years. So, as a result, there'll be fewer in-house translation departments at these end clients, which we used to rely on as a good training ground for translators. You'd spend some time in an engineering company or a pharmaceutical company or a regulatory body as a translator. Later on in your career, blossom as a translator, we'd snap you up and work with you on a freelance basis. But now, less of that happening, less of a training ground for freelance translators. And yes, the sort of last point, the end clients tend to want everything cheaper and faster every year. And they're aware of computer-aided translation, machine translation tools, and they think that these things can magic words into existence, and they perhaps forget the skill and the art behind it. But nevertheless, things are moving forward, and they expect things quicker, and they expect things to be cheaper. I suppose in a way it's our role to educate them. That's not always possible. But just to be aware, things are changing, and it's important to be aware of the different skill sets you might be required to have as a translator, as well as the different softwares you'd be expected to know about with reference specifically to computer-aided translation. That said, it can be enjoyable to work with an agency. There are all sorts of different shapes and sizes, from the very corporate giants. I worked for RWS as a project manager for a while, a large company, a large team of in-house translators, a large team of in-house project managers, generalists. They provide translations for the patent industry, a bit of medical, a bit of pharmaceutical, all the way down to the other end of the scale, where I work now at Dora Worth Languages, where there's 11 of us, and 6 of us are project managers. We have 1 in-house translator, 1 medical specialist, who we rely on quite frequently. And so there's a broad range of agencies you could work with. We're constantly involved in business development, so whereas that might be quite difficult as a freelance translator, as well as having to work 10 hours a day on your translations, to be able to go out there and meet clients and generate business, we have a specific team member or department to do that for us. So working with an agency, you're possibly more likely to get an interesting and varied workload, as we're constantly seeking it out. We're a good buffer between you and the end clients as well. Part of our job as project managers is to negotiate and to problem solve on your behalf as a translator, and be the face to the client, or many clients. And again, just to echo from the first slide as well, fewer translation departments in pharmaceutical companies specific to our industry means less opportunity to gain in-house medical pharma translation experience. So working with an agency can be a really good way of getting exposed to a broader range of subject matters. So a little bit about our company, Dora Worth Languages. It was founded by Dora Worth, who was Russian. Her family escaped Russia in the counter-revolution of 1919, and she travelled through Europe, eventually ending up in London, where she was translating speeches from the radio for the Daily Express during the Second World War. After the Second World War, she set up her company, which since 1962 was specialising exclusively for the life science field. And her son, Sam, now is the CEO of the company. So it's a sort of family, it's got a family feel to it, and as I said before, it's a sort of smaller end of the spectrum in terms of size. But what we rely on is a global supply chain of talented linguists, and we're very aware that we're only as good as that global supply chain, and we go through sort of rigorous processes to make sure that we have the best translators working for us. Very generally, these are our clients. The bread and butter really for us is pharmaceutical companies. When they want to sell a drug in the European market, sorry, if I drift away from the microphone, just let me know if you can't hear me. When a drug company wants to sell their drug in Europe, there are a number of hoops they have to jump through. One of which is they have to have the full specification of the drug translated into 24 member state languages. So we will oversee that process of the translation of everything from the ingredients and how it's administered, or the dosage forms and the package insert you pull out when you buy your drugs from the chemist, through to the labelling that goes around the package. We would translate it all into 24 languages. And just to give you an idea of the scale of that, we need 24 translators to translate it. We need 24 translators to check it. And then we, as project managers, will mediate between the two versions and deliver a final QC ourselves. So we're talking about 48 individual linguists and a team of project managers for each of those projects. Some of our clients include clinical trial units, so we translate all the planning stages that go into clinical trials, as well as the results, if they're performed abroad. And the results come back in a different language, we'll translate those all into English, or vice versa. Device companies work in a similar way to pharmaceutical companies, except they create syringes and defibrillators and machinery and that kind of thing. So we are specialists, but there is a reasonably broad range of subject matter we deal with. What sort of translation what we do, I suppose I've just covered that there. The product information, the SPC and the pill, is that's the specification I was talking about earlier, that we would translate into 24 languages when a pharma company is trying to market their products in Europe. Most of our translators are aware of the processes involved, and they're quite easy to work with. There's a lot of templates involved, there's a lot of terminology which is specific to the field, which you have to know to translate these. But we rely on a good team for those. Clinical trial documents, and one I enjoy for a sort of morbid reason, I suppose, is the discharge summaries and patient reports. Tend to be reports that come back from hospitals if you've been well abroad or there's been an accident and it needs to be translated back into your native language or for whatever other reason. They're extremely medical. They can be about just about anything that can befall a person when they're abroad. So they're very technical, very medical, and we would normally rely on physicians who have languages to translate these as a result. So as I say, our translators, a lot of them are physicians, nurses or scientists or have a history in clinical research, and they also have languages, which has enabled them to become freelance translators in the field, but also linguists who've had continued professional development, which has added up to quite a bit of medical experience. As we were just discussing as well, you have sometimes teachers who come from a sort of linguistic background who are able, they have a passion for a certain part of medicine. They can take that on through courses and interest and eventually come to be competent enough to translate it, and everything in between. Other suppliers we use, and I'll come on to why this is relevant in a little bit, is we do recruit project managers and desktop publishers and people who can pull apart PDFs with scrawled doctor's notes and put them into beautiful Word documents for us to translate, or create labeling for packaging and in all sorts of different softwares. There's plenty of different suppliers we need, not just translators. That's the standard I think we go by for our translator requirements on the screen there now. So formal higher education, an equivalent qualification, or 5 years documented professional experience. In reality, there's just such a varied mix. And what we look for in linguists, there's, I suppose, some concrete bits there and some other soft skills. The first two, as I've already mentioned, the ideal is a medical background or a scientific background or a statistics background or a technical background, and a translation qualification or appropriate experience. Excellent IT skills is becoming more and more valuable as we ask you to take care of a lot of different documents in all sorts of different formats. We need you to have version control, so we need you to have a computer at home where you rigorously store documents in the order in which you receive them and send them out in the same way. You need to work with all sorts of layers of track changes and all sorts of different software packages. So it's really good to keep on top of IT skills, as well as just being able to type. We expect usually around 2,000 words a day from translators, but some you can double that, some you can half it, but it's as a guide. So yes, IT skills are very important. We would usually recruit translators in the country of their target language, simply because it makes sense from a quality standpoint. If you spend too long not speaking your native tongue, then it will probably get rusty. And although that doesn't block anyone who happens to be a native Italian and lives in France, it's just something that we bear in mind when placing jobs. Responsiveness and positive professional attitude are super important because we are just people working with each other. We may be an agency, but you will be working with an individual project manager. And communicating during projects is super important, not to disappear halfway through a project and not tell us why, or to take on more than you can chew and let us know on the day of delivery. Being able to let us know if you're having problems and we can try and problem solve on your behalf with the client is also very useful. But weirdly, some people do just tend to disappear. That's the kind of the problem with communication sometimes I find is they don't want to tell us what's wrong, so they disappear for a few days. We're late with the project. It's not ideal. So responsiveness, good communication skills, and that's usually clear from the moment when we recruit a translator how they're going to, what their personality is like, whether they're likely to be one of those sorts of people or not. So from the get-go, positive professional attitude is super important. Just some other bits and bobs about how we run things. As I mentioned in the first slide as well, all our translations are checked by a second translator. It's not the case with all agencies, it's just the way we do it. And it means that we can constantly review and evaluate our translators because we are always reviewing them. We would always send back any changes or disagreements we have with you back to you for you to approve or reject. It's not a character assassination. We're not trying to sort of say you're a bad translator. It's just how we promote the development of our translators by giving you feedback. Extra QC step by the project manager. We're all, as project managers, we're all linguists first. Most of us have translation qualifications as well, but we're not translators. So we will review translations from a completeness standpoint, checking numbers and things like that, checking it against the original brief. Again, we'd come back to you if we have any problems. It's important not to be defensive and be patient with us as we try and understand your decisions. We have all sorts of different projects ranging from 2 months to 2 hours, and we may call on you to do things in the evenings or at weekends or in the middle of the day. It's just so varied, we have no idea what it's going to be from day to day. So it's important to be patient with us. We do have a lot of respect for our linguists, and we understand that we are only as good as our translators. I suppose I mention that just because I feel sometimes there's a feeling with agencies that we're big and bad and scary, and we don't really care about translators, and we just want everything done quickly and cheaply. But it's not the case with us. A few different ways of getting specialist knowledge that we would look for in our translators. Conferences run by the ITI are super helpful. There's all sorts of webinars online. That Alexandria library actually was just noted by our medical director a couple of days ago as being a really good resource for webinars. Everything from translation to human physiology to common interpreter gripes to all sorts. And there's a wealth of information online. If you find something you're interested in and passionate about within this kind of specialist arena, then just plow into it. And I think that's the best way to become proficient in the terminology and the subject matter. And your CV, the sort of starting point, I suppose, when you approach us, the most important information really is the languages you speak. What's your mother tongue? What other languages do you speak? We probably won't believe you if you say you can translate equally well from one language into another and vice versa. Just through experience, that tends to be how it works. We like you to specify what is the mother tongue, how are you going to translate. Am I running over time? No? Excellent. You have 4 minutes. Ah, great. Okay. So, yes, try to add value. As I said at the beginning, cat tools and machine translation is a sort of juggernaut rushing forward. Even if you can't always get the opportunity to translate as you'd like to, offer proofreading and editing and project management and whatever else you can think to add value to your service, just like we do with our clients. Provide examples of your work, dissertations during your studies. Any interests you have within that are relevant to the field, anything you feel might be relevant, just to give us a taste of what you're aiming at. Keep it simple and professional. You know, a page with the relevant information, smileys and things, not going to help. And also be careful of the CV scams. If you post your CV online, anyone can see it. And there's this very strange wave of scammers that we've noticed. Every day we receive CVs, slightly typos here and there, strange email addresses they come from. We run them through this website, which is a list of kind of found out scammers. Does that make sense? Just to check, because what happens is you post it online, they find your CV, they change the contact details, send it to someone like us, say we award them a job, they run it through Google Translate, send it in with their invoice, and hopefully they're going to get it back. With no, they'll get their invoice paid before we realise it's a load of rubbish. It must work because we get CVs every single day from these. So just be careful. Don't put your CV online. I would recommend just provide contact details so they can get in touch with you. Would seem more logical. Yes, I just touched on that really. What else can you offer? Just really try and think about what your skill set is and what you can sell to us and what we can sell for you. Bilingual facilitation is an interesting one that's come up quite recently. People asking to have, I suppose it's like interpreting, but with a bit of translation mixed in. You'd be plonked in the field and you'd be interpreting and translating between departments of this company that's, say, based in Japan and America, or Japan and Britain, translating between the two. There's all sorts of things out there. Just look at your skill set and what you think you can provide. Stick it on your CV and send it through by email, or approach us at conferences, on our website, however you can get in touch. First thing we'll ask you to do is perform a translation test that should be fairly impossible to bluff. It's quite technical, it's quite relevant to our specialist field, and I'm sure the same is true of other agencies. Once you pass that, we'll evaluate you on your next 3 jobs, and either stop using you or continue using you or monitor you, but whatever happens, we provide feedback so you know where you stand. Yeah, and with my final 30 seconds probably, as I said before, communication, honesty are so key. Just tell us what you can handle, and we'll be happy to, converse about it, and don't take off more than you can chew. Don't disappear during a project. Ask plenty of questions. If you don't understand a project, if you don't understand our instructions, maybe because we've misunderstood our instructions. So always important to be in regular touch with us. And update us on any new skills. If you go to a particularly interesting webinar, or you've just found a passion for surgical science or something, get in touch with us and let us know, and it'll be in our mind that that translator is trying to improve their skill set, and you'll be in our mind when we come to place work. Just stay in touch, really. And as I said before, have a thick skin. We'll send you feedback. People will be constantly criticising your work. They may be wrong, they may be right, but just take it on board, try and be objective, and that's how we improve, I suppose, and enjoy it. And and so, I hope to work with all of you sometime in the future. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Right, well now, quick exodus. Could I ask our speakers to come and take seats? You've had so much information during the course of the day. I hope you can absorb a lot of it. And as I said before, if you've got a question, if you could put your hand up and then wait until the microphone reaches you. And also say if, Teo, could we? Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Right, question there in the middle. There. Yeah. Thank you. And also say if it's for a particular speaker. Thank you.
Hi, my question's for Paul. I was wondering if the UK does leave the European Union, will that have an effect on the number of English translators that are needed?
Great question. The UK is not leaving the European Union, surely. I don't know. I get a vote as well. I might vote to leave. It's an open question. We don't know. We simply don't know what will happen. Whether the British nationals, people working in the institutions with a UK passport, will be able to stay. Whether they'll have to leave their jobs, we don't know. I'm pretty sure there wouldn't be a way for new British nationals to get jobs in the EU if the UK leaves. But whether the existing UK staff are allowed to stay, we're not sure. It might come down to part of the negotiations for leaving the EU that would have to happen. There is a bit of a precedent with Norway. A few years ago, Norway looked as though it was going to join, and we recruited quite a lot of Norwegian staff in advance of that. And then at the last minute, they decided they changed their minds, and so Norway didn't join and isn't a member of the EU. Those Norwegian staff were allowed to stay, so we do have some Norwegian staff members working for the EU, but Norway isn't a member. But we just don't know. What is clear, though, I mean, what is sure, is that there will still be a need for translation into English, because English, I'm pretty sure, would remain the main working language of business within the EU. Would the EU be able to recruit enough speakers of English at native level to cover all their needs? Would they all come from Ireland if Ireland stayed in? I don't know. It's an open question. Interesting one. Can I use this opportunity just to fill in a couple of things that I forgot to mention in my presentation? I didn't manage my time very well, so sorry about that. I didn't really talk about interpreters, qualifications for interpreters, for those that are interested. I said that to be a translator, you don't need either a language degree or a translation qualification. To be a staff interpreter for the EU, you do need a master's in interpreting, which will usually mean that you will have done a language degree. So I meant to say that, but didn't. I also made a flippant comment about only taking young people, actually. There's no age limit for staff positions. So it doesn't matter if you've got grey hair, you can still apply to work for us in the EU institutions. There really is no age limit. And I also meant to mention that I've got 3 different leaflets here. One on, with more information, one on freelance translation, one about trainees, and one about staff jobs. So I've got a few, which I'll put them out at the end, so to reward those that have stayed until the end, if you're interested. I don't have enough for one for everyone, but they're also online as well.
Can I add something? Can I add something in answer to this question? If the UK were to leave the European Union, translation would increase because policies would no longer be aligned and they would have to be translated. They would no longer be developed jointly. People would possibly travel, maybe not less, but with more difficulty. And generally there would be an implosion, a closing of borders so that languages would, after one generation, be poorer. And so there's much more need for a linguist after that.
Thanks very much.
My personal opinion.
Sorry, I just had one other quick thing. You said, and for the traineeship, it said graduates only. If I'm an undergraduate and I'm doing a master's just now, can I apply for a traineeship?
You have to have graduated by the time you start. Did you say you're applying for a master's?
No, I'm doing a distance learning master's.
So you've already got a bachelor's?
I've already got an undergrad degree.
Yeah, that's all you need. You don't need a master's.
Okay.
I mean, you don't need a master's to do any of our traineeships.
Okay.
It's only a bachelor's. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, up there, Phoebe.
Hi, I've got a question for Karen, yes, but also for Martin, I think. You spoke about creating a website and how you can generate inbound traffic. I guess a way of doing that is creating a blog, but my feeling is that everyone's doing blogs. And my question is really, how effective are they in your experience? And are there any tips that you can share with regards to blogs? And I've got a second question, that will be for Paul. You talked also about English, and you spoke about mother tongue and your main language. Is that going to be a problem applying for a job as a translator at the EU if English is, for example, not your mother tongue?
So, Kari first.
Yes, blogs are a very useful tool. It's useful to have a blog on your website, or indeed separately from your website, because on a blog you can actually go into much more detail about specific topics that you may not want to have as a page on your website. You can develop them more, and blogs, you can tweet links to your blog posts. That will then bring traffic into your website. And it doesn't matter that 1,000 translators have already written about the difference between machine and human translation. You're presenting yourself as a knowledgeable person in the industry on particular subjects. And not everyone will have seen everything. And if they have seen it, they just won't read it. So it doesn't matter if you regurgitate. Everyone blogging is regurgitating everyone else's information anyway. That's what blogging really is. But you're putting your own personal personality into it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Mark.
Mark. Hi, Mark. A blog is a website over time. It's the same thing, except it develops over a period and you know when things were written, which is an important indication of context. A very good blog will, of course, attract attention, but any blog and any website is useful, I completely agree, because it certifies your existence. You meet someone at a do, you give them your card, and they say, have you got a website? And if you haven't nowadays, you're suspicious. There's a reason why you haven't got a website. The peaks on my websites are not organic, meaning that it doesn't command enough attention to drive traffic to it, though I've had it for years and it's getting better and better. I will have a spike tonight after you've met me and you all end up on my website. But it will certify my existence and leave a trace. I do have a blog, it's called Your Words in Mine Like My Talk, a sideways glance at conference interpreting, and apart from a few advertisements of talks and things I do, it's mainly 23 manifesto articles where I lay out clearly what I say and what I think. It's very well clicked. Very few comments, very few dare to comment, but perhaps amongst you are the brave, who knows? Okay,
thank you. And the question about the EU?
Yeah, I have a blog, but it's not about nothing to do with language, so I'm not going to plug it here. Yes, I was talking mainly about translation into English because I work in the English translation department and my job is seconded from the translation department, the English translation department, and our main target when we're doing these sort of recruitment talks is recruiting native or native level speakers to come and work for the English department because we have a particular problem recruiting enough people into that department. You can imagine how difficult it is to get enough native speakers of English that know, say, Czech or Hungarian and French and translate those into English. So, but if your native language or your main language is a different language, there are all the other language departments. So there's recruitment to all those other language departments, whatever your, EU language, 24 language departments, whichever it is. But there's no requirement. We don't sort of check your passport or your upbringing and define native language, define main language. If you want to have a go at the competition for translators into English, and English isn't strictly your native language, why not have a go if you think you're hard enough? Why not have a go if you think your language is good enough? Why not? You will be up against native speakers, but maybe you'll win through. We do have, I was mentioning in the break, because of the particular position of the English language department, particularly in the European Commission, which is the biggest translation department, because we really do translate from all the other languages apart from Maltese and Irish, we really do need to have that ability to translate large volumes of those languages, which is not the case in most of the other language departments. We do have a number, I think about 10% of our department, something like that, is non-native English speaking. So we do have people who they've mainly actually transferred from other language departments. So most recently, a Latvian translating in the Latvian department into Latvian has transferred into the English department to translate into English. We have a particular lack of Latvian, so they're helping with that, but their English has been deemed good enough to produce translations into English. So a little bit like the UK has become a cosmopolitan place, and the UK's higher education system now contains many people with lots of other native languages. The English language department of the European Commission, the same sort of process is happening a little bit there. So try it. There's nothing to stop you giving it a go if it's not your native language.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's one up there. Then there'll be one down here. Oh, and there was that one first?
Yeah, this is a question for Craig. Thanks very much for your talk. It's just about test translations. I was wondering, what length do you normally ask for? What conditions apply to them? And are you then able to use them for clients, as it were? Are they ever paid? Or if you could just talk a little bit more about those, that would be good.
I'll try. They're usually about somewhere between 500 to 750 words. We would usually pay the translators for that. Pretty sure we do, as I say that. But yes, long enough that we can put some information there in there that will show us whether you have the medical knowledge required, as well as the, sort of the translation skills, but not so much that we're asking you to do, you know, a 5,000-word thesis translation. It's rather unfair, and it won't go to a client. It's a sort of stock translation that we've put together, or source text that we've put together for the purpose of the test. Yeah.
Can I just add there that very often translation agencies who are more general than yours, perhaps, will give a test translation of maybe sort of 250, 300 words, and quite a few translation agencies won't pay you for the test translation. So you are different in that you have a very specific subject matter that you need to test. Yeah.
Is that it down here, I think? Oh, no, there first, sorry.
Hi, I've got a question for Paul. It's about whether or not you can be a freelance interpreter for the EU. So you're going to do the test to be interpreter in Brussels, and at the same time work as a freelance translator. Can you work in both of those two disciplines, or do you have to sort of plump for one and go for it?
I don't know 100% sure, and I'll look into it now, and email me if you got the email address, and I'll check it out. But I'm fairly sure that you could do both of those. Once you're freelance, it's only the staff jobs where we're clearly quarantined off from each other and we have nothing to do with the interpreters, and vice versa. No, I mean, I'm not sure we would have any way of knowing that anyway. No, I'm pretty sure as freelance you can do, if you can get the work, you can get the work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so down here.
Also, Paul, you mentioned the into English translation competition, and you said it's not being run this summer. Why is that? And are there any vacancies this year for native English speakers?
Yes, so none of the languages sort of, the recruitment competitions are always by language, individual language, but not every language every year. So there's a central recruitment body called EPSO, European Personnel Selection Office, and they are the ones that decide the rhythm of these recruitment competitions based on requests that come to them from the services to say, look, we need to recruit translators into English. They get these requests. When they get a certain number, there's a particular volume, they'll say, okay, we've got enough now that we can justify putting on a recruitment competition. And that leads to this reserve list, which is the number of people that are then eligible to be recruited into a job, that then serves for a year or two. And what their job is to manage the numbers coming through on these reserve lists to the number of posts available. So there isn't that much turnover each year to justify having a fresh recruitment competition for translators into each language every year. So the last one for translators into English was summer 2013. I had been hoping there would be one this summer, next month, but it's not something the translation service decides. So the EPSO, the recruitment service, said it's going to be at the earliest summer 2016. So that's that. But there is, as I mentioned again quite quickly, there is this call for applications for temporary positions for up to 6 years, which will be a much more abbreviated recruitment process, but for those particular language combinations. So the first language, the first source language has to be any EU language apart from French, Spanish, German, Italian, Maltese and Irish. So if you've got one of those,
I've got English and Polish.
Right, so, but then you would need another one, which can be any...
I've got the German.
Right, so you can apply. So I'll be very disappointed if you don't apply for this. Check the...
If I don't get a good result.
I'm sure you're a good candidate and you'll win through. But the link that I put in the presentation, and I don't know how we'll circulate it, but come to me afterwards if you know, I can give you the details. If you look at that link, then I'm hoping that as early as next week, that call for applications will be there with all the details on how to apply.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Back behind you.
I have two questions to two panelists again. Craig first. So far, I heard from my translator friends, and I kept getting those kind of agreements as well. Whenever I or a friend of mine applied to a translation agency to be included in their database, they are generally given test translations, which is okay. But then again, I keep seeing those freelancing agreements. Some of them are extremely detailed, and to the point that you start reading them, and at some point you say, okay, here's the samurai sword. Please kill me. I don't want to read any more of this. Or if you can't kill me, I'll do that myself kind of feeling it gives me. Yeah. So basically, do you provide that kind of freelancing agreements to budding translators around here?
Well, you're asking, do we have a translator's agreement in place that we expect you to read and sign?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It mainly covers confidentiality. We try and maintain confidentiality both directions, so the client doesn't know who's done the work, and you don't know who's received the job. You also don't know who else is working on the project, other linguists, so it kind of protects everyone's anonymity. I must admit, I haven't read through the whole thing, so I do feel for you. But I think that's the only agreement we would need to sign, is the confidentiality agreement.
And does your contract, your agreement, does it protect the freelancer as well, as much as it protects you and your other client? I just want to know that.
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure about that. You'd have to, you'd probably have to maybe email me or something, and I can find out for you. I don't know that for certain.
Thank you. My second question is to Paul. To the best of my knowledge, there are works for freelancers. There are tenders for freelancers. I kept seeing those in the past on DG Translation's website. Am I wrong?
There are what, sorry?
Tenders for translations.
That's right, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Along with a group of translator friends of mine, we provided all the documents and everything. We didn't win, obviously, the tender. But then again, I wonder if there is some sort of way to stand out in those kind of applications. I'm not trying to ask any sort of insider information from here, but then again, how freelance translators should act or react while compiling all those application documents, basically.
Yeah, that's a good question. Luckily, I don't have any inside information to help you to stand out. I'm not involved at all in that side of things. So we have an entire unit in DG Translation that deals with freelance contractors, that organises those calls for tenders. I've not been involved in it. Indeed, we were told not even to publicise the fact that there was very recently, that's the one you're referring to, I think, that closed just a few weeks ago. There was a call for tenders. We were told not to publicise it so that we don't give advantage to anybody that's got the information. So my job is not to get involved in that at all. So how would you stand out? I really don't know. Probably by bidding a very low price. I know that the range of prices goes from a figure which is actually very low to a figure which is quite high. That's the range. But the lower end, I was very surprised at how low it was. I don't know. One of the professional organisations has asked us to whether we can put on some kind of training session or information session about how these calls for tenders are organised. I'm asking whether we're allowed to do that. In any case, I don't think there's going to be another call for quite a while. There is, maybe at this point I can mention for those that perhaps do have enough experience, there is a way that you could still work as freelance. If you go to our website, the list of people that have these framework contracts to do our translation is public, and also the number of contracts and the amount of money we paid to those contractors is also public. It's on our website, look it up. And you can then see who's getting the translation work for us. nothing stopping you approaching them, saying, I know you have the contract to do translations for DG translation. Can you use my services? It's up to them to decide whether they can use you to fulfill their contract with us, and whether they can fill all the terms and conditions of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
There's one in the middle there, and then down here.
Firstly, I would like to say thank you to everyone. It was very informative. And my question is for Paul. On one of the tables with the language information, I noticed a little red column at the end saying others, so I suppose it's non-EU languages. So do you, I mean, not you personally, but EU, work with the Russian language at all?
Yeah, we do get, I took that slide out for time reasons, but I do have a slide breaking down the other languages. The volumes are very small. We do get some Russian. It's mainly Chinese, Arabic, Russian, I think in that order. We get quite small volumes of Russian. If we get larger documents, they will be sent out to freelance. If it's a shorter documents or more confidential, sensitive documents, they stay internally. We do have quite a few staff members, there's about 10 of us, can translate from Russian. And we get so little of it that whenever there's a Russian job to be done, an email gets sent round, we've got a 3-page Russian job to do. Within 2 minutes, it gets picked up. You're talking into Russian, are you?
Yes, yeah.
Into Russian?
Yes, I do speak Russian, yeah.
But, sorry, I thought you were leaping for the microphone because I'd misunderstood your question.
No. It's just because basically I'm from Estonia.
Okay.
And I speak an Estonian and Russian.
Okay.
And so I thought whether any documents, as in the Baltic states, there are a few millions of Russian native speakers. So I'm wondering whether any documents are translated in Russian language as well. Or
into Russian at the commission level, no.
No. Okay.
But if I understand correctly, Russian is not an official language of Estonia.
It's not an official, but lots of documents still coming out in both languages.
Yeah. But, well, the Estonian government doesn't send us any documents in Russian to translate, right. And we don't translate into Russian. Certainly not to communicate with the Estonian government.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
hello, everybody. My name is Deborah. I have a couple of questions for Martin. The first one would be, in what way the fact that you're bilingual affected your path to become an interpreter? And the second one, if you're working only with English and Italian, how you find the competition in the market, and if it's difficult to work with just one language combination? Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. The fact that I am an interpreter is not a professional choice, it's a life choice. I was born bilingual. My first transfer from Rome to London was at the age of 3 months. And since all my life, whether I resided in Rome or in London, I have spent 4 to 7 months every year of my life, either in one country or the other. It's a very rare symmetry, depending on the fact that my father was with the Italian embassy here, and some foresight on the part of my parents. My daughter is 9.5 years old. She has been to Rome 112 times, which is once every 27 days of her life, if I calculate correctly. Obviously more intensely when she was a kid and so on. The fact that her mother is also to do with airline companies does help. So the job is a therapy for the life. It's not the other way round. When I was very young, I used to teach English in Italy, and that was lovely because my life was balanced. Then I began teaching English in Oxford, and everything went far too English, and I had to stop that job to rebalance. There are people who are bilingual, there are people who are bisexual, there are people who are bicultural, and I have to live on a bridge. I cannot go one way or the other. There will be stronger instances of Italian. Coffee I will not tolerate anywhere north of Rome. But within the fluid sense that nothing is set in stone, I aim to balance everything, and I mean everything as much as possible. How do I manage with 2 languages? Not as well as I used to, but I expand the markets. I am local in Rome and I'm local in London, which means I operate from there. I go there 3 times a month on average. And from Rome and from London, I will be considered local, both in terms of costs, in terms of transport, and in terms of presence. I have 2 phone numbers. Everything is perfectly symmetrical. It's a bit like that character in Batman, if you remember.
Thank you. There was one up over there.
Hello, my question is for Paul. You were talking about learning new languages, the kind of opportunities you can get if you get a job in the EU.
Sorry, I can't quite...
Sorry.
I didn't quite hear that, sorry.
I was wondering about the learning other languages opportunities that you were talking about. My father is Portuguese, and although he should have taught me Portuguese, he really hasn't, but I've learned it a little bit, but not to the level that... I remember you were saying, obviously, there's a mother tongue, and then there's another language you need, well, 2 more languages that you need to have a good comment in. Sorry, I'm not explaining it very well. You were talking about in the recruitment, you said we needed basically 3 languages, obviously 1 mother tongue, and then 2 more that we speak very well. Obviously, my English usually is fine, and my Portuguese isn't, but I was wondering if that could be considered as, you know, you do an application and maybe they think actually Portuguese being one language we actually need is not so much of a problem that I don't speak it as well as I could.
Yeah, so we wouldn't look into your family history or anything. But no, simply, and I mentioned this to a couple of people in the break, we don't look at your qualifications in a language because we give you our own test. If you pass our test, it doesn't matter what your qualifications are. So you would have to pass the same test translating from Portuguese into whichever language. I mean, which language would you choose as your main language, translating it into?
I'm French, so that would be my mother tongue, and then
into
English.
French. So you might do English and Portuguese into French. You would still have to pass that translation test from Portuguese into French, the same as anybody else that might know Portuguese to a very high level. But I would say don't underestimate how well you know Portuguese. Huh? You probably know it a lot better than you think you do. Between now and the time when you would be doing that test, you've got plenty of time to brush it up. You only need to read it. You don't need to speak it. In our tests, you'd have to speak some English as part of the testing. For a permanent staff job, you wouldn't have to speak Portuguese. And we let you bring your dictionary in as well to the translation test. So I think you could probably do it.
Okay, thank you. There's one down there.
Hi there. I've got a question for Craig. In relation to your test, computing test, and so much. As a member of the professional bodies and organisations here in the UK, I feel that I'm qualified. So, what is your take on those more experienced professionals who are looking into expanding their careers, and why do we have to be subjected to those other further additional tests?
Could you just repeat the last bit of your question? I just missed it.
It's just that being a member of an organisation, we are already required to provide all the previous experience. We are required to provide relevant references and so on. So my question is, why do we then, more experienced professionals, why do we still are subject to rigorous tests?
That's a good question. I suppose I feel like we have to have a level playing field to a certain extent. We have processes which we have to declare in order to get our own accreditations, our own ISO accreditation, and things like that. So I suppose we have to follow the same path that for every linguist. But I take your point. I take your point that it seems strange that with such experience you would be following the same route. Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, it would certainly help. It would certainly help your CV when it comes to us, and our medical director who reviews the CVs would probably see instantly those are the things he's looking for, certainly. And I also think that would help if the languages you speak are oversubscribed. If you're a French to English translator, for example, there's a lot of those on our database. And qualifications and accreditations like these you mentioned might be more useful if you were a French to Italian translator, or a Czech to English, maybe a bit more rare, where you stand out already. Does that answer your question a little bit? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm copping out a bit. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that's probably, we've already overrun, and I think our speakers have already given us a lot of time, so I'd like to thank them very much for their contribution. And also thank, on your behalf, the organisers of today. We have the ITI and Havila Peck for the University of Westminster. And thank you for coming. And do remember your questionnaires.
And leaflets at the front if you want them. Yeah, no, I think you're right there. I switched it off.
Well done.
Good to meet you. Maybe I'll see you at some point. I'd love to keep yourself.
Maybe I'll try your.
Oh, but you're not your iPhone. iPhone inhibits NFC. I'd love to, but very fascist.
Yeah. Can I?